My name is Lee Barfield, and we're in Nashville, Tennessee today. It's May the 23rd, 2005, and we're going to interview Mr. James O. Bass, Sr. today. This project and this interview is taking place as a part of the Legal History Project that's sponsored by the Fellows of the Tennessee Bar Foundation. Mr. Bass, let's start with your full name for the record.
My full name is James Orin, O-R-I-N, Bass, B-A-S-S.
Right. How old are you, and where were you born, Mr. Bass?
I was born in Sumner County, Tennessee, and on July the 12th, 1910. So I'm rapidly approaching 95.
Great. Let's begin a little bit with your parents. Tell us a little bit about your mother and your dad and your brothers and sisters.
Well, my father was one of two children. He was the youngest of two children. He went to Vanderbilt, graduated from the law school he was born in 1875. Graduated from law school in 1906. Is that right? No. He graduated from law school in 1896.
1896. What was his name?
His name was Francis Marion Bass.
All right. Did he practice law?
Yes, he did. When he got out of Vanderbilt Law School, he went into a partnership with Mr. Lit Pardue, a friend of his, and they practiced together until 1902. And in 1902, Mr. Ed Price, a prominent Nashville lawyer, became the district attorney in this district. And he was allowed one assistant. And he asked my father to be that assistant, and my father was happy to do it.
And when your dad became the assistant to General Price, what role did he have in the district attorney's office? Did he try a lot of the cases?
Well, he tried, yes, most of the cases, actually. The same as it is today. The assistants usually try the smaller cases. And he handled the grand jury. As I said, he was, but the general at that time was only allowed one assistant, so he had to do everything.
Okay. Did he, at some point, your dad, Francis Marion Bass, did he replace General Price as the district attorney?
Yes, in 1906, General Price decided he wanted to get back into private practice. And so he resigned, and Governor Cox appointed my father as district attorney.
Okay. How long did your dad serve as district attorney?
He served out the remaining 2 years of General Price's term, and then he wanted to get back into private practice.
Okay. So, and then did he begin to be called General Bass by lots of lawyers and everyone in the community?
Except for his close friends, he was pretty generally called General Bass the rest of his life.
Now, your dad, when he went into private practice, Mr. Bass, where did he practice physically? I know in Nashville, but where was his office?
He had an office on the 8th floor of the Stallman building.
And who did he practice with?
Practiced by himself until Well, Mr. Sims got out of law school, I think, in 1914.
And that would be Mr. Cecil
Mr.
Sims.
Cecil Sims,
Right.
and when he first got out of law school, he went with the L&N Railroad as sort of a claims man, among other things. Well, at that time, my father had returned to the private practice, and one of his clients, he was trial attorney for the L&N Railroad. So he and Mr. Sims got to work together quite a good deal. And within a year or two, Mr. Sims resigned his job with the railroad and became an associate of my father.
Okay. World War I intervened around 1917 or so. Did your dad and Mr. Sims participate in World War I?
Yes, both of them went into the service. I believe, I don't remember the month, but 1917, roughly a year before it was over. My father was commissioned as a major in the Judge Advocate General session, and he went to Camp Custer in Michigan for a while, and then he ended up at Governor's Island, New York. Mr. Sims was in the artillery and in combat in France until the war was over.
Now, after Mr. Sims and General Bass returned to Nashville following World War I, did they get together and begin the formation of the law firm of what we now know as Bassberry and Sims?
Yes, when they came back from the Army, they decided that Mr. Sims was entitled to be a partner. I assume that was his decision, and so they formed a firm called Bass and Sims.
Now, what happened to the Berry? Where did that come from?
Well, Mr. Frank Berry graduated from Harvard Law School, I've forgotten, somewhere around 1910. And he came to practice in Nashville, and he joined with a very fine lawyer named Smith. I believe his name was Robert Smith. And they formed a partnership called Smith and Berry. Now then, if you want me to go any further with that.
Yes, tell us how Bassberry and Sims
well, my father,
comes together.
Among other clients, he was the counsel for the Cumberland Valley National Bank. At that time, it was located at the southwest corner of 5th and Church. And Mr. Berry was counsel and a director of the American National Bank. The control of the American had been purchased a year or two before 1920, I don't remember the exact date, by Mr. P.D. Houston and Mr. Paul Davis. And Mr. Berry was the bank's attorney and was a director of the bank. So in 1921, the American Bank and the Cumberland Valley decided they would merge. Well, of course, with my father being a director and counsel for one, Mr. Berry for the other, they worked very closely in consummating that merger. And in 1922, they decided that they would form a partnership. So they dissolved Bass and Sims, and they dissolved Smith and Berry and formed Bassberry and Sims.
Now, how many lawyers were with the original Bassberry and Sims in 1922?
Well, can I name them? Because
Name
I
them all.
remember,
Yeah, that would be good.
Better.
Yeah.
It was, of course, it was my father and Mr. Barry and Mr. Sims, the original founders. Then there was Elmer Davies, who later left the firm and ultimately ended up on the federal bench. And a man named Washington, who only stayed a very short time. And I believe in 1922, when the firm was formed, that was all.
Okay. Was Bassberry and Sims about the same size as other firms in Nashville, or was it larger or smaller, or were there any firms any bigger?
Oh,
terms
there
of
were
number,
probably maybe some that had a half a dozen lawyers, but there were no big firms in the sense that we know them today, no full service firms, because nearly all the lawyers at that time were full service themselves.
Right. Now, that gets us to the formation of Bassberry and Sims. Let's go back a minute to your mother. Tell us, what was your mother's name?
My mother's name was Mary Jane Dunn.
And tell us about your mother.
Well, she was one of 11 children. She wasn't the oldest and she wasn't the youngest, but she's somewhere in the middle. Her father was Blackman Hayes Dunn. He was born in Hendersonville and lived there all of his life.
Hendersonville, Tennessee?
Yes.
All right. And what was Mr. Dunn? Did he fight in the war between the states, the Civil War?
Yes, both of my grandfathers were in the 7th Tennessee Regiment, and as a part of the A.P. Hill 3rd Corps of Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. They participated in the Battle of Gettysburg as well as Fredericksburg, Harper's Ferry, 2nd Manassas, pretty much all of the battles that the Army of Northern Virginia fought.
What was your grandfather's name?
Which grandfather?
Your dad's dad.
His name was James Orrin Bass.
So that's who
I'm
you
named for him.
You're named for him. Okay. And it was now what was his rank in the Confederate Army?
He was a captain.
Okay. And what about Blackman Hayes Dunn?
He was a sergeant.
Okay.
Both of them in 7th Tennessee.
7th Tennessee.
But not in the same company. The captain, that's Captain Bass, was the captain of Company I, and Mr. Dunn was a sergeant in Company E. So they were in the same regiment, but not the same company.
Did you know your grandfathers? Did you know Captain Bass? And Mr. Dunn? Sergeant Dunn? Did they survive the war and continue to live after the war?
Yes, they both. My father was wounded at Gettysburg. My grandfather Bass was wounded at Gettysburg, but not seriously. And they both survived the war.
All right. Tell us about your brothers and sisters.
Well, I had one older brother named Francis Marion Bass Jr. Then I had an older sister named Mary Blackman Bass, the Blackman coming from my mother's father. And now, what do you want to know about him?
Well, I want to know about Francis Marion Bass because there's a famous historical character by the name of Francis Marion, the Swamp Fox, and
Well,
for all these years I've
well,
wondered about the
well,
relationship.
that would be in connection with my father's name. That's an interesting thing because it has been debated in the family whether he was named for the swamp fox or for something else. And I've decided that it was something else, and I'll tell you what it was. In 1861, when they enlisted in the Confederate Army, there were three brothers from Silver Springs, Lebanon. One was Captain Bass, my grandfather. Another one was a brother named Francis Bass, and another one was a brother named Marion Bass. Now, Francis, I believe it was Francis, one of them got killed during the war, the other one got severely wounded, survived the war, but died very shortly thereafter. And I have always decided in my own mind that the captain had named his only son, my father, for those two brothers.
Was Francis Marion Bass your brother, or Mary Blackman Bass? Were either one of them lawyers?
Yes, my brother was a lawyer. He was a graduate of Vanderbilt, won the Founders Medal, and he went into the Army in 1942, and he was the head of the contract and claims section for the Air Force. And he didn't get out until early in 46, I believe. And then he came back, of course, to the office.
And he practiced at Bassberry and
Oh,
Sims.
yes. Well, he'd been practicing there before he went in the Army.
Yeah. And now the Founders Medal is awarded to the student with the top academic grade point average at Vanderbilt Law School.
That's my understanding.
That's right.
Mr. Sims won the Founders Medal also.
Also, yes. Now, you grew up. Tell us a little bit about your childhood. Did you grow up in Sumner County?
No, we moved to Nashville, so I'm told, I don't remember this, when I was a year old. And we lived at 105 16th Avenue South, which was a residential neighborhood at that time. But I would spend in my preteen years and early teen years, I would spend a good part of my summers at Hendersonville on my grandfather's farm. Had my own pony and everything like that, and he was quite a sheep raiser, and I can remember driving sheep with him, which gave me a great thrill. And he was really a delightful person to be around anyway, and I enjoyed him. And of course, I had a barrel full of cousins with 11 children.
Now that's Blackman Hayes Dunn that you're talking about there. Yeah. Now, how did you herd the sheep? How did you do that?
Well, I had dogs and just drove them.
Drove with the dog.
Once you get that lead sheep, if he can jump through a hole in the wall, all the rest of them will follow him.
Okay. Oh, great. Now, did you go to grade school in Nashville?
I went to Tarbox, which was located at 18th and Broad, just a couple of blocks from where I live.
And then where did you go to high school?
Went to my MBA, Montgomery Bell Academy.
What was MBA like briefly as a student there when you were in high school at MBA?
Well, it was very small. I think perhaps, I don't like to guess on numbers, but I would say something between 100 and 200 students. They had a good faculty, it was, I'd call it a top-notch educational institution, but in a fun environment.
Yeah. Were there any teachers or coaches there that influenced you, that had a positive influence on your life?
Well, Mr. Ball, the headmaster, who taught some classes, when he had two sons, John Ball and Moultrie Ball. Moultrie was a year older than me. John was older than that, but Moultrie went to Sewanee. And in my last year at MBA, Mr. and Ms. Ball invited me to ride with them up to Sewanee and see the school. I'd never been there. And I liked it very much, and so I decided I'd go.
So you enrolled in Sewanee in what year?
In 1928, I graduated from MBA and enrolled in Sewanee.
Tell us about your experience at Sewanee. Was there anything in that experience that was kind of driving you in the direction of law?
Well, I really never had any doubt I was going to practice law, and at the end, my first year at Sewanee, I took an extra course or two, which was permissible for you to do that. And then at the end of my second year, I had done the same thing in the second year. So I went to Dean Baker and told him that I had 3 years of law school confronting me after I got out of Sewanee, and asked him if I could graduate in 3 years. And he said, well, if you've got the required hours, yes, you can do the work. Sure, you can graduate if you want to do it. I hate to see you do it, but I have to let you do it. So that's what I did.
Did you do any military service?
Yes, I went into the Army in 1942. I was commissioned as a captain in the Judge Advocate General's Department. And I first they sent me to school at the University of Michigan, which was the Judge Advocate General School, and I was there for, I think, 2 or 3 months, studying primarily the manual for courts martial.
Mm-hmm. Well, but let me go back a minute to Sewanee just a second before I get you in the military service. Was Sewanee the University of the South at the time you attended? Was it only men at Sewanee, or were there any women that were students there?
No, wasn't any women on the mountain.
No women on the mountain. What did y'all do for parties?
Well, we got off the mountain.
Okay. And you graduated from Sewanee in what year?
In 1931.
31. And then did you go to law school?
Yeah. I went to Harvard Law School. Now, at Sewanee, there were only about 250 in the university. And when I went to Harvard Law School, the first lecture class I walked into had 250 in it.
How did you choose Harvard as opposed to your brother, your dad and your brother had gone to Vanderbilt?
Just simply because I thought it had the best reputation and I wanted to go to the best school possible. And they had a fantastic faculty.
Who was on the faculty at the time?
Well, Roscoe Pound was the dean. Sam Williston was the contracts. Eddie Morgan and McGuire were on evidence. Then they had Seavey, and they had all the guys. They were the ones that wrote the books.
How did you like Harvard Law School?
Well, I liked it all right, but not in the sense of enjoying it as a school, because it was certainly not like that at all. You didn't live in a dormitory. You only knew people that are living in the boarding house or that you met in some other way. And certainly the school, they didn't really care whether you were there or not. If you did the work, passed the exams, great. If you didn't, you were out.
When did you graduate from Harvard Law School?
1934.
And what did you do after graduation from Harvard Law School in 1934?
I came back to Nashville, and I had worked at Bassberry and Sims in the summertime since I had been going to the law school. So I was familiar with the courts generally, and a lot of the lawyers.
Now, we have summer law clerks at law firms all across the state and the country these days. What was it like being a law student at Harvard Law School but working for the summer at Bassberry and Sims in the 30s here? What kinds of things did you do?
I did whatever they wanted me to do, but they didn't, and they paid me accordingly, which was nothing. But I spent a good deal of time going over to the courthouse, listening to the trial of cases, and I learned a good deal that way.
Now, where was the Metropolitan Courthouse at the time, the Nashville Courthouse?
Well, it was where the courthouse is now, but this one was built in 1937, so the old courthouse, but it was what was then in service, but it was on the same location.
Okay, and they tore the old one down and built the new one in 1937, and now they're renovating the one,
yeah,
the 1937 courthouse.
They're calling it the old courthouse.
That's right, and plus building a huge parking garage, right?
Yeah.
Next door.
Well, all of that was commercial.
Mr. Bass, let's talk a little bit about your own family, your wife and your children. What was your wife's name, and how did you get to meet her and marry her?
Well, my wife's name was Suzanne Warner. She was the daughter of Mr. Edwin Warner and Ms. Susan Richardson Warner, both prominent families in Nashville. Mr. Warner and his brother, Mr. Percy Warner, started the Warner Parks. I had known Susie actually when I was a teenager, but when I went away to school and for 6 years, I sort of lost track of her. But Bill Waller, who was a prominent lawyer here, was divorced from his first wife, and Bill and I used to play tennis in the afternoons quite a good deal, and he'd say, well, I got a date with so-and-so tonight, come on and join us. And I said, well, I remember he had asked me one night, and I said, well, I don't have anybody. He said, well, why don't you call Suzanne Warner? He was at that time dating Susie's older sister, Milbury. And I said, well, she's got somebody she's been going with for years. I don't think much of that. Well, he said, try it. I think that's what you're talking about's on the rocks.
Yes.
Well, I knew he was speaking from knowledge of a sister, so I called her. That was it.
And you all started dating and were married how long? How much later?
We married in 1937, June the 9th, 1937.
The Warner Parks, the Percy Warner Park at the end of Bellamy Boulevard and Edwin Warner Park across Old Hickory Boulevard, and they're adjacent, are such wonderful assets to Nashville and to the community. Can you tell us how it came to be that Percy Warner and Edwin Warner gave these parks to the people of Nashville?
Yes. Mr. Percy Warner's son-in-law was Colonel Luke Lee. Well, I call him Colonel because he was a colonel in the First World War. You remember, you may not remember, but he led a group that tried to capture the Kaiser.
Yeah.
It was quite a to-do about it. They went up into Holland where the Kaiser was. But anyhow, they didn't succeed in catching him. But he was a United States senator at one time, and of course, and he owned the Tennessean newspaper. He was a very prominent man, and he was married to one of Mr. Percy Warner's daughters. Mr. Percy Warner was the head of the park board for years and was intensely interested in the parks. And Mr. Colonel Lee made the initial gift of land, which I've forgotten how many acres it was, which started the Percy Warner Park. And then Mr. Percy Warner added to that considerably. And then after Mr. Percy died, his brother, Mr. Ed Warner, who was my father-in-law, became the chairman of the park board, and he gave and raised money for the giving of a vast amount of additional property, and that's what's called the Edwin Warner Park, and of course they joined one another.
Where did the Warners make their money? How did they acquire the property in the first place?
Well,
did they own the property and then give it, or did they buy the property to give it to the city?
Well, I think that, as I said, the first property was given by Colonel Lee. Now, he was very active in the development of Belmead. Mr. Percy Warner, I think, was in the utility business. And the old Nashville Railway and Light Company, which I remember very well when we had streetcars, and I think that was one of his, one company in which he was interested in. And Mr. Ed Warner was connected with the utility business to a more limited extent, but he was interested in the banking business. And he worked with, I think it was the Old Nashville Trust Company.
How did they get interested in the parks, and how did they have such a vision to see the importance of parks to a community, particularly a metropolitan community?
Lee, I don't know how to tell you other than that they were very, both of them were very interested in nature and things of that kind. And I think that probably led to the initial choice of the municipal people as of Mr. Percy as the head of the Park Service. I mean, Park Board. Now, then Mr. Ed Warner was just very much like his older brother, Percy, and when Percy died, why, they chose Mr. Ed Warner to succeed him as head of the Park Board. And Mr. Warner, Ed Warner, all for the rest of his life, he went to that park every afternoon. He'd go home for lunch. He had an office in the Commerce Union Bank building where the Radisson Hotel is now. And he'd go home and eat lunch, and then he would go to that park and spend the afternoon out there. And he, back in the Depression when you could get WPA workers and all that, just anything to give them work, they got a lot of help out of the WPA people. And Mr. Warner directed all of that. And then they built the roads. And
when did Mr. Edwin Warner die?
Mr. Edwin Warner died in 1945, 2 days after I got home from Europe. And I was on 2-week leave, and I came home, and he died the second night I was home.
Now you and Susie Warner, Edwin Warner's daughter, had 4 children. Tell us about those children.
Well, I got three boys and a daughter. 2 of my boys are lawyers with Bassberry and Sims. The other one is in the investment counseling business, Lee Downer and Bass. My daughter is married to a lawyer, Jay Bowen, who started out with Bassberry and Sims, but is now head of his own firm.
And you have any grandchildren that are lawyers?
And that are lawyers, yes. I've got so many that there might be any vocation you can name, but I've got 11 grandchildren, and I've got 12 great-grandchildren. Now, of my grandchildren, I'm just have to run through the list. There's only one that's a lawyer.
One lawyer, and that's
Jim Bowen, and he went to Columbia Law School, and then he went with the Cravath firm in New York, and he was up there about 2 or 3 years, and he came back here within the last year and went into his father's firm with him.
Right. Okay, let's move to now. Jim and Warner, as you said, have practiced at Bassberry and Sims throughout their careers, and Jay did for a while, and then Jim's practicing as well. Let's move to your career as a lawyer and talk a little bit about what it was like to as a lawyer. But before I get there, let's talk about the military service, because we skipped World War II and we don't want to do that. We alluded to it earlier, and then we didn't come back to it. When the war broke out, you were practicing law at Bassberry and Sims here in Nashville, and you were in the Stallman building at the time? Is that where the offices were?
No.
Where were y'all's
we were
offices?
in the American Trust building.
Okay, when had Bassberry and Sims moved to the American Trust building from the Stallman building? Do you remember?
No, I don't remember, but I would say it was about the time that Bassberry and Sims was formed.
In the 20s.
Subject to this, that it may not have been built quite that soon, but I think within sometime in the early 20s.
Did the law firm Bassberry and Sims take
At the 10th
some
floor.
office space in the new American Trust building when it was built?
Yeah, it was
Okay.
shortly after it was built.
What do you recall about the impact of the Depression on the law firm of Bassberry and Sims on the practice of law generally and on the Nashville community?
Well, the Depression was of course, a disaster. Anybody that didn't live through it would not believe it, but nobody had any money. The banks didn't have any money. And there were runs on the banks, and a lot of them went under. I can remember very well that the American Bank that we represented forever almost had a vice president named Wakefield, and he was the head of the correspondent bank department. And he'd get a call from, I remember one particular one of what we call country banks, one at Shelbyville. It said, "We got a line out here, and we got to deal with it." He'd grab about 3 suitcases and load them up with $100 bills, get in the car and go down there and put the suitcases up in the teller cage where everybody could see them, and with the money, and that stopped the run a lot of times in those smaller banks. And we had all sorts of things from a legal standpoint. We represented Mr. D.D. Robertson, who was the state superintendent of banks. And it was his job to wind up all of the banks that went broke and to otherwise act as a state regulator. So you can imagine we had every kind of legal question that either an operating or a closed bank could present. And that continued for several years.
Did the American National Bank that Bassberry and Sims was representing at the time, did it weather the Depression?
Yes.
Fine?
Yes,
was it in
did.
good? How did it get through the Depression financially?
Well, one way that it got through was that the comptroller and the FDIC, which was brand new, of course, at that time, and the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, that's the one I was trying to think of. They took some stock in the bank as security and made a loan to the American, as they did to a great many other banks. It saved the banking industry really in this country. And of course, all of those things were repaid after the Depression was over and the bank became liquid again. They repaid all of those loans.
Do you remember how the economy in Nashville began to turn around? Could you, from the low point of the Depression, how did it begin to move forward and to progress?
Well, you know, when you go through a period when nobody's bought anything, and then somebody gets a little money in the pocket, they go buy things, and it just gradually got better.
And
so it wasn't any overnight event that just said, now you're going to be better.
Did the law firm do all right financially through the Depression years?
Oh, yeah, we had more business.
You did? And
I've just told you about D.D. Robertson.
Right, so you were busy.
He kept us busy.
What about the rise of Hitler and the beginnings of World War II? You're practicing law in Nashville during that period of time. Did you sense the war coming on and that that the United States would need to get into the war, or how did that develop?
Well, yes, I think most everybody realized well in advance of Pearl Harbor Day, which is December 41. I think everybody pretty well realized that we were going to get in it. But going further back than that, and this is interesting, when my father was in the First World War and stationed at Governor's Island, one of his compatriots up there was a colonel by the name of Allen Gullion. Well, by the time 1941 came around, General Gullion was a general and was the Judge Advocate General for the United States Army. And Daddy, when he was president of the Tennessee Bar, no, it was after he was president for the Tennessee Bar, but whoever was the president at the time asked him to get General Gullion to come down here and make a speech to the Bar Association, which he did. And while he was here, I was sort of the general's aide. I chauffeured him around, showed him around places, and did whatever he wanted. And he told me before he left, he said, "Jimmy, you ought to get in the reserve because we are headed for the wall just as sure as guns on. You're going, and if you could get in the reserve, you can get a commission without any problem when the time comes." Well, you know, young and foolish, I didn't listen, and I didn't do a thing about it. And then after we got in it, well, of course, I applied to the department up there, and I went up there, and I got interviewed by colonels right and left. I never saw so many, and did get a commission.
Was General Gullion still around during World War II?
Yeah, but I didn't see him.
But you didn't see him. So World War II comes along, Pearl Harbor occurs, and how did you decide? Did you decide to go into World War II, and how did you decide to do that? Did you have a choice? Did you volunteer? Or
oh yeah. I had two little children at that time, married with two children, and I was in 1941. I was 31 years old. So I don't think I was. I know I wasn't subject to the draft at that time, but I, like nearly everybody else around, I was in good health, and I felt like I had an obligation to do something about it. And I remember going to Mr. Warner's office, and
that's Mr. Percy Warner.
No,
right?
no, that's Mr. Ed Warner, my father-in-law.
I'm sorry, Ed Warner, your father-in-law.
And I said, "Pop, I think I ought to get in the Army." It wasn't that abrupt, but I mean, I talked to him about it, and I said, "Now, you know, if I do, I got two children, and that means they're going to come back to you to live." I had recently built a house on Linwood Boulevard, and Susie and I had moved in it only about a year before. So Mr. Warner couldn't have been finer, which I knew he would be, and he agreed with me that I ought to do it.
What'd your wife say? What'd Susie say?
Well, Susie never, I think she agreed with it. I never asked her, really.
You did? Did you talk to your father about it?
Yeah, I told him.
You told him what you were going to do. Right. And then, so then
I
you
told Mr. Sims,
told Mr. Sims. And,
Mr. Barry.
and they all agreed that that was the right thing to do.
Yeah, I say they agreed. They didn't protest.
And so you then went into the Judge Advocate General. You got a
I
commission.
was commissioned as a captain.
And you served where?
Well, I first went to, I said a while ago, I went to the Judge Advocate General School at the University of Michigan for a couple of months. When I got through there, I got leave of, I think, a week, and I reported back to, I got orders to report back to the 104th Infantry Division. It was at Camp Adair, Oregon. Well, I was tickled to death because I didn't want a desk job, and that meant that I was going to be on the staff of the general of the division. So I went by train, of course, to Chicago and to Oregon, and then by bus to Camp Adair, which was down between Albany and Corvallis. And my immediate superior was a colonel by the name of John W. Bonner. Fine fellow. He was from Montana and was later governor of Montana. And after about, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, I got orders to go to the Command and General Staff School at Fort Leavenworth on temporary assignment. Well, I went, and I went to school there for another 2 or 3 months. I remember very distinctly, it was in the middle of the summertime, and we went to school in an old cavalry barn. It had a tin roof on it, and it must have been 120 in that building, and they had 100 people in there in classes. It was a nightmare. But anyway, when I got back, about the time I got back, Colonel Bonner was relieved and moved to First Army, I believe. It was a promotion for him, and I was made the Judge Advocate for the division. Well, that's like being a city attorney for a city of 25, 30,000 people. And in addition to being responsible for all of the court-martial, disciplinary punishment and everything else that you have to do. But I liked it, and we were on maneuvers in Oregon, and then we moved to the desert, and we maneuvered there for a while. And
Which desert?
Arizona desert.
Arizona.
About halfway between Phoenix and Yuma. Incidentally, Phoenix at that time, you'd hard to believe, but it wasn't a whole lot bigger than Columbia, Tennessee is now. But anyway, my father died in October 1943 while we were on maneuvers in Oregon. And I got leave to come home for his funeral. And when I went back, the division had moved and was moving to the Arizona desert. and I was promoted along about that time to major. We stayed in the Arizona desert, I guess 7 months, and then we were moved to Fort Carson, Colorado. And we stayed there for some months, and then we went to Camp Kilmer in New Jersey, which was a staging area to go overseas. And we went overseas, landed as the first division to land directly in France without going through England. You see, this was about 3 months, 2 or 3 months after D-Day, so the Cherbourg Peninsula had been cleared, and we landed at Cherbourg. Oh, it was a devastated place.
So this was like in September of 1944?
Yeah.
Or so,
Yeah.
August or September.
Yeah.
And what did y'all do? What was your assignment there in Cherbourg, and as you came into your...
Well, after all of our equipment got there, we were just living in pup tents there on the peninsula while we were getting all our equipment together, and then we moved up through France into Belgium, and went into combat in Belgium and Holland, and we were up there, I don't know, a couple of months maybe. Along about Christmas time, we moved down and went into Germany at Aachen. And we went from Aachen to Stolberg and Westweiler and Eichweiler and whatever other kind of Weiler, and finally got to Düren on the Rohr River, and fighting all the way. And
were the casualties heavy, or were we winning pretty good
pretty,
at that time?
Pretty heavy.
Pretty heavy?
Pretty heavy, because it varied. We had a devil of a fight on the Rohr River, crossing that. But, and then went on and with the 3rd Armored and some of the others, captured Cologne, which was, of course, was a great big city. And then we went down toward Remagen and crossed the Rhine River on a pontoon bridge, and went on through Germany, and we were on the Boulder River, which was roughly 90 miles or so, maybe 100, from Berlin, when they stopped us. And when I say us, I mean not just my division, but we were a part of the 1st Army. And we sat there for a week or two while the Russians took Berlin. And then we were still there when the Germans surrounded. Now, when that happened, of course, we'd been in, my division had been in combat since roughly September. And they flew us back to what was that seaport? Anyhow, and put us on a ship.
A seaport on the German coast? Or
yeah.
on the German coast?
No, on the French
coast.
And we came back.
Le Havre. No.
Yeah, it was
Le Havre.
Le Havre. It was Le Havre. And incidentally, it was a sad commentary on French people, but you couldn't help but notice for the several weeks that we were stationary in Germany, I had occasion to go back to 12th Army Group in one of the artillery little planes, and we went to Leipzig, and they had cleaned up Leipzig completely.
Wow.
Bricks cleared off the roads, everything. Of course, the devastation's still there, but not. When we got to Le Havre, and it had been an opportunity for the French to clean up Le Havre, Lord of mercy, they'd had months. Yeah. It was just like it was. It had never quit fighting there.
The German people had cleaned up.
The German people, as
Leipzig.
compared with the French people,
Yeah.
it was amazing.
Yeah. And you came from Le Havre. Where did you come on home?
Came home and got leave for 2 weeks, I think. And that's when Mr. Warner died. Mm-hmm. And then I had to report back to Camp Atterbury because I was in command of a troop train, and we went to San Luis Obispo, California. And we had been there about a few weeks, really getting re-equipped. And we had a shipment number and a sailing date to go to Japan when they dropped the bomb. Well, with the end of the Japanese War, which occurred when they dropped the bomb, with all the combat time that the division had, we had enough points to where we could be demobilized very quickly, and I got home, I think, about around the early part of October.
1945?
1945.
October 1945. As a JAG officer, were you ever involved in combat? Did the lawyers fight, or were y'all behind the scene?
No, we didn't know, never involved in combat, but we saw plenty of V2s and V1s.
What's a V2? V1?
Well, the V2 were the first rockets that the Germans had. The V1s were the drone planes, which were themselves a moving bomb.
So and you were in headquarters, so you were a good target for the Germans.
Well, yeah, everything was a target.
If they could
but I never was in active combat. No.
So when you came back after BJ Day and you came back to Nashville, you came back to Bassberry and Sims in 1945. Is that right? Why don't we take a break here? Mr. Bass, let's turn for a little bit and talk about your career as a lawyer with Bassberry and Sims here in Nashville, Tennessee, since, over the last 60 years or so. Let's start out with your early experience at Bassberry and Sims. We've covered a little bit of this, but I want to really talk a little bit about the firm and what it was like, particularly in 1922 and in the early years of the law firm, and also the bar examination. let's go to the bar examination first, and then we'll talk a little bit about the law firm. What do you remember about the Tennessee bar examination? When did you take it? Where did you take it? And what was it like?
Well, there wasn't anything about it to cause me to remember it particularly. I took it in 1934. We had no cram courses like they have now. You just went up and took it. I took it. It was in the House chamber at the Capitol.
Do you remember how long it lasted?
No, 2 or 3 hours, I guess.
Would you remember anything about the types of questions that they asked? Standard fact pattern questions and ask you to apply the law to the facts.
That's essentially what it was.
Okay. Now, when you joined Bassberry and Sims, do you remember what they paid you as a beginning lawyer? What year was it, and how much did they pay you?
1934.
Okay. What were you paid?
Paid me $75 a month.
Okay. Was that enough to live on in those days?
Well, I was living at home, and it was more than I made when I was going to school. But I have to say this, I supplemented that just a little bit because Fike Farmer had been teaching a class put on by the Bankers Association, a class in commercial law. And it met in the director's room of the American National Bank. And I've forgotten, once a week, maybe twice, I'm not sure. And he said to me one day, I'm tired of this law class I'm teaching over there. Would you like to do it? He said they'll pay you, I don't know, $50 a month or something. I said, yeah, I sure would. And so I took the job. And that extra 50 helped the 75 some.
Absolutely. Now, Mr. Fike Farmer, who was Mr. Farmer?
Well, Farmer was a lawyer at Bassberry and Sims when I got out of law school. The people who were there at that time were Mr. General Bass and Mr. Berry and Mr. Sims, Fike Farmer, and Bob Orr. And Bob Orr left pretty quickly because he got a job with somebody in Washington, the government. But Farmer was there for the first 2 or 3 years that I practiced, after I was admitted. And one of the hardest working people I ever saw, I was very fond of him.
Now, he's an interesting person, a member of the Nashville bar, an interesting lawyer, because he had, as I recall, a role in, was it the Rosenberg case?
Well, he was a one-world government man. Yeah, I don't know what his role was in the Rosenberg spy trial. I do remember that he was very interested in it, but if he had any role to play in it, I don't know what it was.
Okay. Now, during the period where you practiced before World War II, the latter part of the 1930s, describe for us your daily routine at Bassberry and Sims at that time. What kinds of cases did you have? What did you normally do?
Well, as I said, I was waking up at 2 summers during the Depression. And we had lots of small collection cases, things of that kind, because I think I said earlier, nobody had any money, and literally that's true. And a lot of notes that the bank held from individuals or businesses, they just couldn't pay them. Not that the credit wasn't good, but they didn't have any money to pay them with. And rather than let statute of limitations run on some of those things, while we were filing them pretty constantly, small notes and big notes too. So I participated in that, and then I was interested in trying jury cases. I had visited over there when Judge Langford was in the Third Circuit and Judge Neal was in the Second Circuit, and Judge Rutherford and Dews were in the First Circuit. And I've spent a lot of time during those summers in law school. I spent a lot of time over there just observing how people tried cases and how the judges ruled on evidence and all of those things, and very, very instructive and very interesting.
Did you have billable time, hourly
No.
billable time at the time that you had to keep up with? How did y'all prepare?
No, not when I first came with the firm. No, nobody ever kept time sheets on it.
So if you wanted to go over and observe for training purposes, you just told someone in the office you were going to go watch this trial.
Went.
You just went. That's good. Did the during this?
But we didn't fix fees on the basis of time.
How did you do it early on in the 30s anyway?
Well, when a case was over, we would figure how much value we had been to the client and fix the fee accordingly. That probably looked like too much for the time spent on some things, and on the other hand, it wasn't near enough. But anyway, that's the way it was done.
How did the clients know what to expect in terms of the fee, so that if a client, let's say the bank, for example, was had hired you to collect on some notes, did you collect some percentage of the amount collected, or did the bank pay you separately?
Well, there wasn't any amount collected. All you got was judgment, but you didn't collect the judgment. It's going to be several years before you're going to collect those. No, well, we were on a retainer from the bank, and so all of that was taken care of by the retainer, I think.
Well, what about non-retainer clients? If someone came in and wanted you to either prosecute a lawsuit or defend a lawsuit, what would you tell them the fee would be?
Well, I think
at the front end?
I think what we tell them was if they asked you how much you're going to charge me, the answer would be, we don't have any idea. we don't know that much about it. It was never a problem.
Never a problem.
I don't remember, but 2 times when there was any discussion over clients' objections. Now, one of them was, well, I won't call his name but he was the head of a pretty good-sized company here. But he objected to a fee that Mr. Sims charged him, but he finally paid it. And the other time was we represented the Maxwell House Company when they sold out to what later became General Food as Poston Cereal, I think was the name of the company at that time. And it was a multi-million-dollar deal. It was a pretty big one, and a lot of work. And when it was over, we built them, and I don't think any of the Cheeks objected to it, but there was some objections. But we collected that too. But by and large, there were not any disputes that I remember of any consequence about fees.
Now, you then went off, as we've already talked about, to World War II, and you came back after World War II. And describe for us your practice in the 1950s and 60s. What kinds of cases did you handle for the most part at that time?
Well, in the 30s, up until the time I went in the Army in 42, of course I was in the legislature for one term in the House and one in the Senate. But I was trying, we represented several insurance companies, and I was trying tort cases, negligence cases, automobile cases. I can remember very distinctly that I particularly enjoyed going around to the smaller towns and trying cases. And invariably, there'd be somebody, some juror or some hanger-on, they always had them hanging around the courthouse, would come up to me and say, "Are you any kin to General Bass?" And I said, "Yes, he's my father." "Well, he's a good one. He tried that feast case." Well, the feast case was one of the most famous murder cases, maybe the most famous one in Tennessee history. In fact, Donnie Payne wrote an article on it in the last year or so. So I like to get out and try those jury cases. I enjoyed it.
Can you tell us briefly about the feast case that your dad
Well,
tried?
if I get into that, you can't be very brief
Can't be
about
brief,
it, because they tried that thing for several weeks, which was unheard of in those days. But you know, it's an amazing thing. Criminal law was the focus point of all the members of the bar back in the early 20th century. And of course, that's where my father initially made his reputation. And then later on, as we got into segmentation and specialization, most of the lawyers, most of the ones that I knew, just sort of quit practicing criminal law. They just don't want to fool with it. And but in the early part of the 20th century, that was the thing. The news media, there was, in that feast case, I've got a file of evidence. The newspapers reported every day verbatim what the witnesses had said, every day. It's amazing.
Wow. Wow. Did you, when you were trying these cases around Nashville, did you try a case in the rural areas any differently than you did in the city of Nashville?
No, I don't think so. You tried them all day, which was different from the city of Nashville.
Oh, in Nashville,
I
they
mean,
didn't.
you literally try them all day. You'd go to court at 9 o'clock, maybe some of them earlier than that, and you stay there all day. And you try them over here, a lot of times they'd adjourn by 2 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that. But no, the method, any of the procedures is the same. You just different people and different background of jurors, of course.
Did that affect in any way the way you might argue the case, if to a more rural jury, or was it all pretty?
Yeah,
Pretty much the same.
I think it affects any lawyer about how he's going to talk to the jury. The makeup of the jury determines that.
What would you say would be the key factors in a successful trial lawyer in persuading a jury? What were the kind of things that you tried to do to carry the day with the jury?
Well, I guess first and foremost, you got to present the evidence in a manner that they don't have to wonder I wonder what do you put that in there for? How come he asked that question? I think you got to give it to the jury in a way that they understand it and they know why there's significance, they know what the significance is for everything that they're listening to. And then your argument is going to fall into place if they really know what the evidence is.
Now,
I don't know if there's any. Some people have it and some people don't.
did you have any techniques that you used to develop a sense of trust and credibility with the jury? How did you do that?
Lee, I don't know how to answer that. Can you be any more specific?
Well, it seems to me that the key to being a successful lawyer, one of the keys, especially with a jury or with a judge, is to have credibility with them. And so that if you've got information that's damaging to your side, sometimes maybe you ought to get it out and tell the jury. You tell the jury rather than your adversary tell the jury about it.
No question about that.
Yeah.
I don't think any lawyer would argue about that unless it was some very particular situation. But it's a whole lot better to bring it out yourself.
We have. You've been a mentor to all the 160 lawyers that are now at Bassberry and Sims, and many that were here and are practicing elsewhere and doing other things over the last 50 or 60 years. But one of the things that we all admire about you that sometimes we don't do as well as you did is you would always go in when you got a new case in, go into the law books and sit down and write out the law of the case initially, right at the beginning, before you filed any papers or did anything with it. And you would do that yourself. You didn't have law clerks do it. You didn't have others do it for you, but you would get in there and know the case. Tell us, how did you learn how to do that? Why did you do it, and why is it a good practice?
I guess I learned that from my father and Mr. Sims, because I never have understood. You take these New York law firms, they've got professional litigators, and they're good. but they don't do any of the investigation work. They don't. A lot of them don't even talk to the witnesses before they put them on the witness stand. At least that's what I'm told. But I can't. I think that's a great mistake. If you don't evaluate the witnesses and know not just what they're going to say, but how they're going to say it, you don't know what the impression is going to be. And if you don't know what the impression is going to be, then you're not well prepared. I think preparation is the biggest thing of all for a trial lawyer.
And you did the witness interviews and did the legal research and brief writing all yourself through most all of your career. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
How did you write your briefs? Did you write them in longhand? Did you dictate them, or how did you do that?
When I started, that was before we had any dictating machines. The first one I ever saw was one they called dictaphone, I think, but it was I didn't want to fool with it. We would dictate to the stenographers, and they'd take it down in shorthand, and then they'd type it. Now, the big problem was that we didn't have any duplicating machines. So that stenographer had to put, if she wanted 4 copies, she's got to put 4 pieces of paper with a carbon paper in between and get them just right, and then put them in that typewriter and type them. Now then you come back and you got to change a word here or there. She's either got to fix another batch of papers and rewrite the whole page, or she's got to pull the paper back, change it on that, and pull it back, change it on the next one. And it was a terrible hardship. Now, as you will find if you ask me further, when I was representing the telephone company and I was doing a lot of work for them, particularly rate cases, I had to have a minimum of 8 copies. I'd have to have 3 for the Public Service Commission, 1 for myself, and 3 for the telephone company. Well, you can imagine 8 sheets. And some of those briefs, there wasn't any limit to what you put in them. Some of those briefs were pretty long, and it was a terrible hardship on a stenographer. And what I'd have to do, and I'd write one of those kind of briefs, I'd dictate to one, and she'd go start writing, and I'd dictate to another one, and rotate them. That's the only way you could do it.
That's great.
Now you write one sheet, when you get it like you want it, run it through the Xerox, and there you are.
Yeah. Did you see what about the changes that the computer has brought to the law practice in your career?
Well, it's not just the computers. The changes have been tremendous. I guess first and foremost, the biggest change in the practice of law generally is the specialization and segmentation that's taken place. They were nearly all practitioners. They did everything in 1934 when I started practicing. I might write a will today and try a JP case this afternoon and do a condemnation tomorrow and a bank, something else. You did everything. And now, after the specialization that's taken place, that's not true anymore. So what has happened is, where you had individual practitioners doing everything, you didn't have any big law firms. There's no point in it. But after you got into the segmentation and the specialization, you began to get these full service firms. You have to. You got to remember that in 1934 we didn't have any code of civil procedure. We didn't have any commercial code. We didn't have any what they call it. I won't say RIGO. Anyway, we didn't have any securities
regulation. Yeah.
And regulations. And the government keeps piling those things together with all of the regulations, and in addition to the laws themselves. It's impossible not to have specialization. You got to have it. And that, to me, that's the biggest single change that has occurred. Now there are a lot of others. As I said, we didn't have any code of civil procedure for providing for discovery. Well, discovery now, you don't fool with a case without discovering everything there is to discover. Well, that wasn't true in 1934. Litigation was an adversary proceeding. You didn't disclose to the other side what was going on.
How was it? What was it like trying cases under the old system there with no discovery? What was there? I mean, those of us who've tried it under full discovery have heard about trial by ambush and gamesmanship and so forth.
That's what the lazy folks like to call it.
Yeah.
Trial by ambush. No, I'm not opposed to it. It's all right with me, but it's like everything else. It's got drawbacks. And suddenly it's not nearly as much fun practicing law when you know everything that the other side's got. It was truly an adversary proceeding.
Well, did you, if you did your investigation properly, did you have a pretty good idea about what the other side was going to say in the case, even though you hadn't taken their depositions or
if you do your own investigating,
yeah,
you're gonna find the same witnesses the other side's found.
But and you could talk with those kind of third party witnesses
if they talk to you.
But you couldn't talk with the adversary
talk to the client,
that are represented by the other side.
No.
So you kind of knew what was going on, but you weren't sure about what the proof was going to be. Is that right? Is that the way it?
Well, if you did your preparation thoroughly, you were pretty damn sure what you're going to be up against.
And did you have any cases that you recall where you had to be nimble of foot, where you didn't something came in that was different than what you kind of anticipated?
Oh yeah, you get surprised, and that's the value of cross-examination. All of those surprises were not always too truthful.
Yeah, that's good. Mr. Bass, you also your work habits are legendary around Bassberry and Sims, not only for briefing and thoroughly briefing the law right at the beginning of the case before you do anything else, but also in terms of your coming into the office early in the morning. You have what time do you come into the office through your careers? What time have you arrived?
I try to get there by 6 every morning.
And how did you get into the habit of coming in so early?
Well, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that because I don't know what the answer is. After my children got old enough to where I didn't have to take them to school, I guess that had something to do with it. And then I found through the years that you can get more done early in the morning when nobody's there and the telephone's not ringing. I mean, we all know that that's it. And I just got in that habit, and I've been I've been doing it a long time.
What time did you leave in the afternoon when you came in that early? Did you leave at an earlier time? Or
Well, up until the time I got married, I left whenever my father and an older brother left.
Well, that was smart.
Because, well, I'll tell you an anecdote about my father. Did you ever know Mr. Ennis Murray?
I heard of him. I didn't know him.
He was a close friend of Daddy's, and my father had a big farm right this side of Goodlettsville, and he loved to go out there. And while years ago he had driven an automobile some, he didn't want to drive, and one time he went backed in out of the garage door with the door to the car open, and from then on he never would drive anymore. So Mr. Ennis Murray would drive him. And Mr. Murray used to tell this. He said, Daddy would say, "Ennis, you driving too fast." And Mr. Murray said, "Now, General, you don't drive, and I do, and yet you try to tell me how to drive." And Daddy said, "I can't lay an egg in it, but I know a rotten one when I see it."
That's great. Well, I've enjoyed coming in early in the mornings with you all these many years because I like to get up myself. I think that's a good habit for young lawyers to engage in. You've served, Mr. Bass, in the state legislature. You've alluded to that previously. Tell us when you served and how did it come that you decided to run for the state legislature and were elected and served in the legislature?
Well, I went to the House rented in 1936 for the 37th session. I don't know that there was anything that particularly made me want to be a candidate, but I always had the feeling that any lawyer or law firm had to have an interest in politics. Didn't mean that they have to hold office, but they had to keep up with politics, and I thought it would be a good idea. And I talked to Mr. Sims, who had been in the state Senate, and he encouraged me to run. So I ran and got elected to the House in 1936, primarily on a platform that advocated the destruction of the old J.P. courts and the substitution of a General Sessions Court. And the bar committee, local bar committee, appointed a committee. The local bar association appointed a committee to draft a bill. And we had it all ready to go. And I went to Pete Haynes. I knew Pete. He was the Speaker of the House, and I said, Pete, we ran on a ticket that we were going to repeal the jurisdiction of these JP courts and going to substitute a General Sessions Court. And I want you to see that my House bill is going to be House Bill number 1. He said, all right, it'll be that. And sure enough, when we convened, House Bill number 1 in 1937 that's the bill.
And what was wrong with the JP courts? What were the reforms there, the small claims courts?
Are inherently unfair because you're a magistrate, we'll say. You may be an auto mechanic, you might be a farmer, you might be anything. You're not a lawyer. But you had the right to run a JP court. And if you decided, as most of them did, well, at least a lot of them, if you decided that you were going to be a judge on a JP court, then you only got business from those who brought it to you. In other words, the plaintiff. And I don't care who you are, those fellows, particularly ones who didn't know anything about law or anything else to do with it, they always decided them in favor of the plaintiff. That's human nature. So they were inherently a conflict of interest in every one of them. And it was just time to get rid of it. And some of the magistrates fought it, some didn't. Well, they had a few good ones. Now, John Draper ran a JP court and a good one. He was later a criminal judge.
Criminal court judge, John Draper from Nashville.
he was. So they all, and I don't mean that as to criticize any of them, but it's just a fact that the automobile mechanic trying to sit as a judge, he doesn't know anything about it.
Did the new legislation, House Bill 1, what were the essential features of it? Did it provide that the judges would be legally trained?
Yeah, it abolished the JP courts, just abolished them completely, and then substituted the General Sessions Court. We even named the initial judges in the bill.
That's great. And then you just served one term in the House.
One term in the House, and then I had not intended to go back.
And you did, but you did.
Well, yeah.
You ran for the Senate.
I laid out, and then in 1941, like all politicians, I was in demand. Well, a number of people particularly business people, asked me to go back, and I ran, and I didn't have any opponent.
And you served one term in the Senate.
And I served a term in the Senate.
Before the war, right before you went to the war.
Yeah.
I
was still actually a member of the Senate when I believe when I went to war. You see, you were elected for 2 years, but you only had one session other than special sessions and one regular session.
And were how many days did the legislature meet in those years?
Oh,
were there a limited number?
Yeah, it still is. I think it's still the same, maybe. I don't remember.
Could you?
I know. I can tell you what they paid me.
What would they pay you?
$4 a day.
$4 a day. Could they? Could you serve in the state legislature and still be have enough time to be an active practicing lawyer?
Oh yeah.
In those days.
Sure.
And nowadays it's hard to do that.
Well, yeah. Now they've all got an office and they all got staff and they got secretaries.
You didn't have offices and staffs and secretaries then?
Oh no.
Did you have a party affiliation back when you ran?
Yeah, I ran on a Democratic ticket.
Yeah, on both times.
Yeah.
Were there any Republicans in Tennessee much in the 30s?
Very
and 40s?
few.
Very few.
They're a scarce breed.
Oh, that's good. Now, back to your work habit. One of the other things that distinguishes Mr. Bass around here, in addition to coming in at 6 a.m. in the morning, is that he, unlike most lawyers here, will not or does not have lunch with his colleagues. Doesn't really eat lunch himself. Now, tell us about your lunch, because I've been practicing law with you since 1974. And on many occasions have invited you to lunch and have been rebuffed on multiple occasions.
Well, you sound a little abrupt with that. I didn't exactly rebuff you. I've just avoided you.
And what do you have for lunch, generally? And how has that helped you be such a wonderful lawyer?
I don't want to tell my secrets. I usually have peanut butter crackers.
And some milk.
Milk or Diet Cola.
Diet Cola at lunch. And that's and you've kept slim, trim, and active for many, many years. That's great. Tell us about some of your most interesting cases. I wanted to talk a little bit about the telephone company rate cases.
Well, the rate cases were. What happened was, we represented the Southern Bell Telegraph Company, which did business in 9 states in the Southeast. That was when they were the old Bell system. They were all subsidiaries. The operating companies were subsidiaries of AT&T. And in 1946, late in 46, I believe, I've forgotten what month, but Mr. Sims had just prepared and filed a petition with the Public Service Commission for Tennessee intrastate rate increase. I had never done any work for the telephone company, and I didn't know a rate case from an apple. I had wanted to take a public utility course when I was at Harvard, but it was a 3rd-year course, and Frankfurter, that later was on the Supreme Court, was the guy that you wanted to get if you were going to take it. And he was on leave of absence to England, so I had never had any experience whatever with public utilities. But when Mr. Sims had a heart attack right after, Woody says he didn't have a heart attack, but I think that's what he had. Anyhow, he was going to be out and was out for some months. And somebody had to take over that case. Well, at that time, Southern Bell had a policy to have 2 law firms in every city. And Mr. Hume of Hume Howard Davis, and later Hume Howard Davis and Bolt, Mr. Hume was the other lawyer for the telephone company. Well, actually, the telephone company on their rate cases, they were primarily handled out of the general counsel's office. They didn't trust local lawyers too much. But anyway, I was the one that had to take over the telephone business of Mr. Sims, which I did, and I mean, I studied night and day for weeks and weeks because I didn't know anything about it. And as I told in one of my speeches to the firm about Uncle Remus saying the rabbit climbed a tree, and the little boy said, "Uncle Remus, rabbits can't climb a tree," and he said, "This here rabbit had to climb a tree."
Right.
So I had to climb that tree, and I did. And I believe Frank Clement was the utility commission attorney in that first case. I believe he was. It could have been Alf McFarland, but it was one of them. I think it was Clement.
And that's Frank Clement, who ultimately became governor of Tennessee several times.
Yeah, he was running for governor then, really.
So now you were not seeking telephone rate increases. Was not a very popular position with the people, was it?
No, it was not. Not with the commission.
Or with the commission.
Tip Taylor was the chairman of the commission, and John Hammer, who I had known when I was in the House, and Leon Gerolman were the other two commissioners. And I tried to get the commission to let me put rates in effect on the bond, and they wouldn't do it, of course. What had happened, you see, during the war, as communities grew, you needed more telephone lines. Well, they are big capital investments, and you can't build a telephone line a half a mile long just to serve one family. It's economically just can't be. You can't do it. You wouldn't stay in business very long. So what had happened was that with the growth in the community and the population, you had a big pent-up demand for telephone service, which the company couldn't grant because they didn't have the lines. And they didn't have the switches. They didn't have all of the tangible equipment. So when the war was over, all these people were clamoring for service, and the company couldn't furnish it. So the only way they could get enough money to make the capital investment was to get their earnings up to a level where they could attract the necessary capital. And so that was the reason for the rate cases in the post-war period, and we had quite.
How often did you have a rate case from the, say, 1950 through?
Well, that case it was filed in 1946, and I think it was about 1951 before we ever got any relief, and then it was only to put rates in effect on the bond after we had tried it before the commission and after we had tried it before Chancellor Wade. And then we had to go to Sam Phelps, who was on the Court of Appeals, and make an application to get rates in effect put on the bond while the appeal was pending, which we finally got it, but that was 3, 4 years, 5 years after the case was filed.
How many of those cases did you have through the 50s and the 60s and the 70s?
Well, I didn't have any in the 70s, I don't believe. Most of them were in the late 40s and 50s. I probably had 4 or 5.
Did you get rates increased in some cases or all cases, or how did it end up working out? Was the telephone company able to grow as quickly as they wanted to?
I think eventually we got relief in every one of them, but we didn't get it for the commission.
You had to go
that was
you had to appeal before you got relief.
yeah.
The
You see, the issue was always one of confiscation, and that's a legal issue, and the commission, I didn't pay attention to that at all. But you get in Chancery Court, Peak Wade had no problem at all in that first case.
now that's Chancellor Wade? What's his full name?
Chancellor Wade.
Chancellor, what was his name? Chancellor Pete Wade?
William
Chancellor William Wade.
J., I believe.
William J. Wade, Pete Wade, yeah. Let me move to another important area that you played an important part in, I think, over the years, and certainly has had an impact on Nashville and Tennessee as well. You served for many years, from 1960 on the board of the First American National Bank, right? And during those years, our firm was involved in attempting to change the banking laws in the state of Tennessee to try to allow more flexibility so that the banks could grow. They could branch. They could go into the smaller communities. What was our role, our law firm's role, and what was the role of the banks in trying to reform the banking laws in Tennessee in those years?
Well, the problem with the banks in those years was the interest rate. You see, we had I've forgotten whether it was 6 or whatever it was, but you couldn't go above that.
It was usury if you went above it.
Well, money was dearer. That was not a fair rate. And what we had to do was get up a higher rate, and we got it through limited constitutional convention. And of course, the banks were very active through the Bankers Association.
We're going to need to change our tape, so we'll take a break here just a minute.
I'm talking.